Welcome everyone from wherever you're logging on, whether it's from the beach or from your home office. That's where I am today. My name is Shirley Leung. I'm a columnist with the Boston Globe. This is our inaugural Leadership Lunch Series sponsored by UBS. Today's session is how companies can integrate strong social and philanthropic values into their mission. To get at that issue, today we have three Boston leaders who are among the 19 Black and Brown executives who have started a new fund that is led by and for Black and Brown communities. They've come together to rewrite the rules of corporate philanthropy. But before we begin our conversation, we're going to hear from James Jack, the head of UBS Business Owners Client Segment. Take it away, James.
Thanks very much, Shirley. Good afternoon, and on behalf of UBS Global Wealth Management, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. And it's my sincere hope that you and your loved ones are all safe and healthy and you're enjoying your summer. My name is James Jack. I'm the head of UBS's Business Owner Client Segment, where I actively work with UBS financial advisors and our business owner and entrepreneurial clients to support them as they start, grow, and ultimately exit their businesses. I'd like to thank today's guest speakers, Mo Cohen, Dr. Maisha Minter-Jordan, and Desiree Rawls-Morrison. And finally, thank the Globe for their continued work and dedication to the city and the Commonwealth and our partnership on this six-part series that we're launching here today. UBS has a very long tradition in Boston, more than 150 years. Our lineage starts in the United States from Payne Weber. And throughout that history, UBS financial advisors have worked with individuals, business owners, and entrepreneurs to help improve their lives and help them leave legacies that matter. Legacy is a very important word for us at UBS. It's one of the key three strategies that make up a framework that we call UBS Wealth Way. Those three strategies are liquidity, longevity, legacy. Liquidity to help provide cash flow for short-term expenses, longevity for longer-term needs, and legacy for the needs that go beyond your own. Oftentimes, business owners and leaders like to separate their personal wealth from their business. But I believe that business and legacy are inextricably linked and that personal wealth and business should be discussed together. And with that link, it can be important for companies to integrate strong social and philanthropic values into their mission and identity. That's why I'm so really very excited to listen and support today's conversation. At UBS, we have resources and experts who support philanthropic advice and guidance for our clients. And more, those conversations have evolved from simply, how do I give money to charity, to developing things like a family or a corporate mission. If they didn't know before, business owners and leaders certainly know now just how important their communities are to their success and are looking to give back even in the face of the daunting challenges of this pandemic. And not only is it a chance to do good for others, but I've spoken with business leaders who see social and philanthropic values as an important customer and employee retention tool. Our values are the important bricks that build our businesses' cultures. With social justice and the challenges of the pandemic in the forefront, businesses are not receding, but are actively modeling the way for others. So today, I'm very excited to learn more about not only why strong social and philanthropic values are important for companies, but the how business owners and leaders can broaden their mission, integrate their employees into decision-making, and engage in the communities that surrounds them. So once again, thank you so very much for joining us today. We hope very much to continue to share in the dialogue throughout the remainder of this series. Thank you to the Globe for doing this important work and to our speakers on their mission that I'm looking really forward to hearing about today. And on behalf of all of us at UBS, please be well, be safe, and remain vigilant. Shirley, back to you.
Thank you, James, and thank you for doing this session with the Globe. I'm thrilled to announce our speakers, more formally introduce them. They reflect the growing diversity of the Boston business and civic community. Boston and Massachusetts, we still have a long way to go, but these three leaders show how much talent is out there. I'm just going to go alphabetically. We have Mo Cowan. He is a former U.S. Senator and currently General Electric's President of Global Government Affairs and Policy in Developed Markets. Next, we have Dr. Maisha Minter-Jordan. She's the CEO of DentaQuest Partnership for Oral Health Advancement and Catalyst Institute. She's on a mission to improve oral health and overall health through medical and dental collaborations. And finally, we have Desiree Rawls-Morrison. She's the Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary for medical device company Boston Scientific. Now, I have some questions prepared for you. Our audience also prepared, pre-submitted some questions. Now, for those of us joining us live on this Zoom, if you have a question during the panel, please use your Q&A function on the Zoom. The chat function has been turned off, so use Q&A, the Q&A function. Anyways, let's start off talking more about this new fund you launched in July. It's called the New Commonwealth Fund, and it came together rather quickly. The goal is to raise at least $100 million, and at least initially in the beginning, the money will be steered towards Black and brown-led nonprofits working on social justice and racial equity issues. I want you to tell us the origin story of this fund. I think Mo and Desiree, you guys were on that very first call back in early June. And if you could take us back to that time, your frame of mind. I mean, this was fresh. This was just in the days and maybe a week or two after the killing of George Floyd and all these protests that followed and erupted in Boston and around the country. What was it like on that first call and that led to this fund? Desiree, I was wondering if you could start us off.
Sure, I'm happy to, Shirley, and thank you for having me here. You know, it's funny, a few days prior to that first call, I had gotten a call from one of the one of the lawyers on my team at Boston Scientific, and he asked me if I would be interested, you know, one of the 19 members, Damian Wolcott, was interested in reaching out to me and wanted to know if I'd be interested in joining this fund. And my response was absolutely, and jumped on that call on June 7th, which was a Sunday morning. I will tell you, you know, after the George Floyd murder, I think like many people, I did a lot of self-reflection around, you know, what I'm doing and towards social justice. And as the mother of two Black boys, the wife of a Black man and the daughter of a Black man, the sister of a Black man, you know, I really, these kinds of issues are issues that are constantly on my mind, social justice issues. But there was something that awoke in me, very similar to many others with the George Floyd situation, that caused me to reflect on, am I doing enough? What should I be doing? Am I doing what I should be doing with my legal degree, right? And just, I had this sense that there was more that I could do. And so when this call came, it really was the perfect time for me, because it coincided with this self-reflection and the sense of, you know, I'm not a criminal lawyer, and in fact had offered my services, believe it or not, following the George Floyd situation to Ben Crump. I asked him if he needed anything from me, because that's how serious I was about the need to do something more. But when I got this call, it was, listen, you know, that's not what I do, but there is economic power and there's political power that I have, that with these other 18 individuals, we can actually really make a difference in the Commonwealth. And it was, for me, just the perfect timing and perfect coming together of what I was feeling personally, and being able to use some of the professional outlets and some of the professional networks, as well as the economic power that I had acquired in a different way.
Mo, tell us a little bit about your involvement in the fund. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, there are other efforts out there for serving Black and Brown communities on racial justice issues. How is this different?
Yeah, thanks, Shirley. Thanks for the question. Thanks for the invitation to join this conversation. Always a pleasure to be with you and have a chance to talk with Maisha and Desiree about these important issues. And thanks to your audience. As Desiree said, listen, in the wake of the George Floyd killing, which at the time was but the latest example of the assault on Black and brown bodies, a number of us, the 18, the 19, if you will, who for the most part have all known each other in a variety of ways for a long, long time, and frankly have worked together on a number of issues, including around community-based programs, social justice efforts across Boston since we've all been here. And it's a mix of folks who were born and raised in Boston. Many of us are transplants into Boston, but all of us who chose Boston and the Commonwealth as a place where we wanted to build our family, raise our families, build careers. So we have a vested interest in this, and we recognize the issues that we're all seeing on national TV. We're not immune from them here, both either individually or collectively as a community. But because we had worked together on so many other efforts before, we knew the power that we could bring to bear to try to address these issues, both bringing our institutions into the conversations and our individual commitment. And because we'd worked on so many other efforts led by so many other people, we thought it was high time, particularly in this moment, both because of the George Floyd killing, the Breonna Taylor killing, the Ahmaud Arbery killing, but also seeing the disparate impact that the pandemic was having it continues to have on Black and brown communities, that this was a moment for those of us in positions of privilege and power to take a leadership role in this regard and try to bring our collective might, influence, and relationships together in common cause to try to help solve some of these problems and focus on the 4 pillars that we focused on, which include healthcare disparities, economic empowerment, youth development, and of course, police and criminal justice reform. Those 4 pillars may sound familiar to your audience because people are talking about them everywhere. And to your latter part of your question, we absolutely recognize, even at the beginning, we were not going to be the only group focused on these issues. And I think it's important for everyone to understand we must not be the only group focused on these issues, right? And we must act in concert and partnership with allies who are also, starting grassroots efforts like ours to try to bring new energy and purpose to the cause, but also established organizations that have already been out there toiling and working hard, often without attention and often without enough resources. And we wanted to help them and add to that conversation by bringing the resources we have to bear to those conversations. Obviously, at roughly the same time, we saw Mayor Walsh announce a similar effort focusing on Boston. The distinction between us and what we're trying to do, and what Mayor Walsh is trying to do, is in the name of our title, the New Commonwealth Fund. We're trying to bring this energy, this attention across all of Massachusetts. And the mayor is focused on Greater Boston, but there's perfect alignment and collaboration there. And as a matter of fact, 3 of our team members, if you will, are working on the advisory group with the mayor. At the same time, we're already meeting with and talking to other groups, including those led by, Sagan Uduwe, who many of us know, who is part of an effort to really drive these issues. We're talking to Pratt Wiley of the partnership about some of the things that he and other groups are doing. We see an opportunity here for significant collaboration because, let's face it, 2 things we know to be true. 1, the problems are vast and immense and require significant collaboration and intent of purpose by so many of us. And we also recognize that resources are vast as well, and we have the resources to put to these problems. And so we're happy to be part of this conversation. That June 7th conversation was the beginning of this effort for us, but we recognize the effort that we're joining a part of has been ongoing, and we just hope to contribute, enhance it, advance it, amplify it for the greater good.
Maisha, tell us how you got involved. Who made the call to you?
So I got a similar call, I think, to Desiree from Damian Wilmot, and it was really, as has already been captured. It's about, from my standpoint, how do we contribute? How do we leverage our collective power and resources as leaders within this community? And I think we've done it in our own individual ways. And the idea of coming together with 18 other amazing people who have established incredible careers to focus in on the issues as Mo has outlined was, it was a no-brainer for me, and particularly given the focus on healthcare inequities, having being on the mayor's committee regarding COVID-19 and healthcare inequities. These are things that are front and center for me. The previous work I've done at the Demick Center in working with underserved populations, the opportunity to join in with other leaders to really think about systems change, which is very distinct from, I think, how philanthropy has typically happened really across this country. It's been very, very programmatic, very, very much focused on some of the ideas that the philanthropists have about communities, less so a direct partnership with communities, and the idea to really look at root cause, to really begin to move the needle on changing the system that allows for racist practices, whether or not they be in healthcare or within criminal justice reform, youth empowerment, all of these areas. For us to take that opportunity was something that was immediately appealing to me and really exciting. And I, as I've recounted to you previously, Shirley, from the moment that I've joined this group to the present time, the level of energy and excitement and enthusiasm that we all have, that we bring to this, doing things after hours with our busy jobs, doing them on the weekends to make sure that we are doing this in the right way, that make sure that we are partnering with the community and really engaging the community in this work is something that I've never experienced before. And it's just, it's a blessing to be involved in this type of effort.
Oh, that's great to hear, Maisha. Tell us about what has been the response from the community to the fund, and update us on your fundraising efforts.
So I'd say, just to kick it off, the community, we've gotten incredible support. I think, as always, community depends on how we define it, but they want to see what we're going to do. And I think part of our initial progress, it has been creating the right framework for community engagement. We're planning on community listening sessions. We're also engaging with our various stakeholders, our donor community. We know that many of the foundations that have supported us thus far really want to be partners with us and want to understand how they can do things differently. So we're planning on various levels of stakeholder engagement. The level of excitement and enthusiasm and support, it's been an incredible outpouring. We definitely need more, but we've been able to reach our 20 million seed goal with the longer range goal of 100 million. So a lot further to go. But the initial support that we've gotten has been incredible, because we have found that we don't know of anything like this that we've seen. We've gotten national attention on this. We've talked with other groups who'd like to do something very similar. But the idea of Black leaders, Black and brown leaders coming together to lead this type of effort is something that we found has been quite rare, and I think has led to a lot of the excitement and energy around this. But more importantly, the intention of really confronting systemic racism in the 4 pillar areas. I think that intention, given where we are with the social justice movement, people understand it and want to support it. More, Desiree, I'll turn it to you for your thoughts.
I would just echo that we've had a tremendous outpouring of support for what we're doing. And, Maisha talked about other groups that have reached out. We've had Black and brown executives in other cities that have reached out and said, tell us how to do it, tell us what you've done, tell us, we want to do the same thing. And so to me, that's a testament to what we're doing. I do agree with Maisha. We've had a number of donations. We've gone to our own companies for sure. We've gone to our own pocketbooks for sure, but we continue to welcome donations to the fund. And, there will be, I'm sure, some questions about how big, how small. We welcome all size donations to the fund, because we believe that we're doing something very transformative here in the Commonwealth, and we want that support.
Desiree, actually, the first few questions have been about, where can I donate, or can you tell me, where can I go? So is there a website?
So our official website is in the works, but you can go to tbf.org. There's a donate button on top of that website, and you scroll down to the new Commonwealth, and it will tell you how to donate. Our official website should be up in the next couple of weeks, but for now, that is where people can go to donate, tbf.org.
And have you started to, if you've raised about $20 million, which is an incredible amount in such a short amount of time, have you started to think of, when will you start making the first grants?
So we're in plans now to start to kick off the community listening sessions. We understand that, there is so much happening right now between the pandemic and the social justice movement that the need to get some things out quickly is there. There's urgency there. So our goal is to try to lay out that framework over the next month or so and to start to get some early grants out before the end of the year. We are still making decisions as to whether or not they'll be in all four pillars or whether or not they'll be in one or more pillars, but we are clear that we need to get some dollars out the door. The economy there are people that are struggling. There are leaders that are doing incredible work and within our communities to keep those communities functioning. There's an incredible amount of resiliency in those communities. So we want to hear from those leaders and we want to support those leaders in that work. And so our goal is to try to do that as quickly as possible. This has all been as incredibly fast as already has been recounted. To start this off in July, to be where we are now in August is just, I think that in many ways it's unheard of. And so we're cognizant of the timeline, but also cognizant of the urgency of getting some dollars out to the community. But we want to make sure that we do that in partnership. We also are very clear that we need to have an evaluation method for what we are, for the grants that we give. And so we want to be able to demonstrate success for all of our funders and for ourselves, quite frankly, first and foremost. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we're all in really meeting several times a week to make sure that we are creating the right framework for success.
And I would add, Shirley, in the audience, that part of the success for us is identifying and giving oxygen, if you will, to some of those organizations out there that may not necessarily be first and foremost on people's radars. And because we are a Commonwealth-wide focused organization, it's important that we listen and learn from community-based partners, including governmental leaders and others across the Commonwealth who can help us identify those organizations. Because our pledge to those who commit to this cause with us is to put those dollars to work in a way where we really feel like it's going to be efficacious and impactful, right? Well, we need to know that, we're going to contribute and invest in good work that's going to have broad application and impact. And so, we're proud of the group we brought together, but it's a smart group who knows that there's a lot that we need to learn from our community partners, and we're committed to do that to make sure this is as successful an effort as it can be.
So the launch of the new Commonwealth Fund is also an acknowledgement that corporate philanthropy can be improved, right? So talk a little bit about that. A lot of the folks on the phone probably, their companies have foundations or they have their own wealth and they want to give money away. And so how do you improve corporate philanthropy?
So just to start us off, and then Desiree, it looks like I thought you were going to say something, but you were muted. I guess I'd start off by saying everyone has good intentions, and for all of the work that I've done in my previous work at the Demick Center in raising funds in partnership with corporate philanthropists has been with really good intentions. I think where we are starting to see the shift is there is a system that we need to take under consideration as we think about approaches. And systemic change requires a different approach that's less programmatic and more so, as I mentioned earlier, focused on root cause. The DentaQuest Partnership for Oral Health Advancement, my company has pledged, $1 million. Delta Dental has pledged $500,000. And DentaQuest itself has also pledged $1 million for a total of 2.5 combined. And what we want to target is healthcare inequities. We focus on oral healthcare and the system that allows for inequities in healthcare as it pertains to African-American communities. The fact that 68% of African-Americans have poor access to oral health is something that we need to understand more deeply than just saying we're going to open up a clinic. It means how do we look at the number of healthcare providers that are within this space that are reflective of the culture of the communities that they serve. It means that we need to understand what happens once a patient enters into the healthcare system. What is that experience like, and how can we optimize that experience such that they're feeling empowered? So we need to start looking at all of these various factors that influence healthcare inequities, influence the outcomes that we all know to be true in terms of poor outcomes for Black and Brown communities as they engage in healthcare. And we would do that in each of the 4 pillars. And so it's really thinking about what are the best practices, as Mo has outlined, led by Black and Brown leaders, leveraging the voice of the community, and then really looking at what are those systems that allow for this. And I think part of what we hope to do in partnership with our corporate philanthropy stakeholders is to not only help them in terms of focusing their philanthropic dollars, but also helping them to understand what are the systems within those corporations that foster inequities, whether or not that's looking at the C-suite, the boardroom, how you hire, what search firms you engage. There's a system that creates where we are today. And part of our goal is to shed light on some of the ways in which we can start to move the needle on changing that system.
Yes, so Maisha said it perfectly. You know, I would just add that, you know, part of what we've seen is that, you know, even with respect to foundation work and philanthropy, there's a systemic bias in how funds get allocated. And that's what we want to blow up and really change that paradigm. And so, you know, we sort of think that if we don't do it, who will do it? And this is an opportunity to do that, for us to take a different look at those brown and black organizations and think about them maybe differently than what our system currently allows us to think about them, to think about, you know, the funds and think about the metrics and think about the deliverables in a different way that allows us to create access in a different way. And that's really what the fund is about. It is sort of blowing up that system that exists in everything, including in corporate philanthropy.
And Shirley, I would add, if I could, just before we move on, is look, we recognize that we three today come from rather large institutions, right? Who maybe we have corporate foundations who regularly contribute consistent with a mission and may contribute large dollars. But one of the things I think it's important for your audience today is you don't have to be GE or Boston Scientific or DentaQuest or any of the other companies involved with this effort to really have positive impact, either through our fund or through other efforts in the community. Philanthropy takes many forms, you know, and sometimes the most impactful form of philanthropy is having your team, your employees engage at a community-based level in some meaningful work, you know, where your contribution is the time and energy and attention you give to a cause. You know, and even in the context of what you typically see in large corporate philanthropy, oftentimes those dollars go to other large institutions who do important work. And in this field, in this space, maybe it's the National Urban League or NAACP, which organizations need that capital. But one of the things we're trying to do here is expose the corporate philanthropic community to some of the organizations who may not, again, necessarily be on the radar screen. And that we can, you know, one of the lasting impacts of our work is not only some of the systemic change we're talking about, but maybe putting these organizations in the mix, in the conversation, on the radar screen for years to come. Because I don't have the specific stat in front of me, but the numbers, it's stark when you think about the low percentage of philanthropic dollars that actually go to Black and Brown-led organizations or organizations that are focused on Black and Brown communities. We're trying to change that through this effort, bring attention to the need for that kind of systemic change.
So one of the among the pre-submitted questions, there was one that really stood out for me. And let's say your firm has embraced anti-racism values and principles. But how do you spread those values to your clients? You know, what are some effective strategies to do that?
Yeah, I think there are many, and I you know, first want to give, you know, kudos and support to those organizations who have taken that step, because it's a change, an important change in language, and an important change in intent when you become anti-racist. But I think some of the things that you can bring to your clients include looking at who are you engaging, your supplier diversity. As I mentioned earlier, looking at, if you're smaller companies, whether or not that's a board or a C-suite, and being able to relay the practices that you've put into place within your organization, and not because it's the right thing to do, but also it's a smart business decision, which makes your business more effective and more productive. So being able to convey the things that you're doing to your clients, makes you a better company, and also demonstrates your commitment, but also demonstrates that this is an issue that is important to you as leaders within that company in terms of making your company more effective and more productive and engaging employees as well as a community in whatever field you may be in. And sharing those practices with your clients is just another bonus that you're bringing to your clients. Because many clients or many organizations may say, we don't have a supply diversity list. How do you get that? And being able to share those resources makes you more valuable to those clients.
Yeah, let's not underestimate what Maisha just said about talking about values and principles too, right? Like that's one of the most important ways to spread it, whether you're talking about clients, customers, business partners, right? When you speak about your values, when you say this is important to us, it's important that we have an environment and we be part of commercial and working relationships who share our values. That starts to have impact over time, particularly if you start to impact how and where you spend your dollars, right? You know, in the worlds that Desiree and I know well, we have vendors, whether it's law firms or consulting firms who work with us. And it matters when we ask the question, you know, tell us how you approach issues around diversity, equity, inclusion, right? It matters when we ask questions, well, who's going to be involved in servicing our matters, right? And inside our organization, it matters when we as employees ask our leadership, you know, how do we spend, you know, our supplier dollars, right? And what are we sharing in terms of best practices, information perspective with those customers, with those clients, whomever. So don't underestimate this moment that we find ourselves in when people, frankly, are getting more comfortable having the uncomfortable conversation around this topic. That's really going to drive the change. And I think there's a lot for us all to learn from those conversations on our pathway to more equitable engagement and interactions across the commercial sector.
Yeah, I think the core values and the culture that you as a company that's embedded in your company are just so critical. And you know how you then show up and how those core values show up are what really impacts the organization. So, you know, as Mo said, you know, do you hold your vendors, for example, to a certain level, but what are the repercussions if they don't deliver, right? I've been in organizations where we've done things like diversity scorecards for our law firms, for example, but there weren't, frankly, any consequences to not doing the job well. They still got great money. They still got, you know, great work from the companies. It's only when you actually hold them to those scorecards and say, listen, you're failing and I'm taking my business away from you, that you really find that your vendors, your clients understand that your values and your culture are not just for the sake of putting something on the wall, right? They're actually the way that you do business. And it's actually the way that you make decisions. And that becomes really important for your employees. It becomes important for your investors, your leadership, your shareholders. It becomes a critical part of your success as the company. And it feeds on itself, frankly.
This is bound to happen once. We have another question from the audience. You know, addressing systemic racism and changing and transforming systems is desired, but feels so large and vague. How do we start? What do we do to start?
So I think the start is with data. In looking and understanding your data and understanding where you're starting from and your starting point. And I think the other thing that I've just in terms of, you know, understanding how you measure it, I have this perspective that it's an incremental measurement. I think if we say that, you know, by 2022 or 2025, we're going to eradicate X and that's going to be the measurement that we're going to apply, it makes it feel that much more daunting. And I think what you do is you measure incremental change when you're thinking about systems change. But I think starting with the data, starting with if you're a healthcare insurer, how are your patients, your Black and brown patients faring? And what are some of the resources that you need to deploy in order to begin to shift that. But what are the systems that you need to put in place even to start those measurements? I think part of that is really analyzing what are your systems, how are you collecting data, and then what that data is the first step. And then beginning to look at some of the root causes of that, and being okay with the fact that we may be at a place where, may not be ideal and our data may be fairly poor, but being committed to understanding why it is, and then beginning to make incremental change. That's, I think, one of the fundamental principles of systems change is that it's something that you measure along the way with an end goal in mind, of course, but that it's something that you have to, again, take a look at the root cause and measure it incrementally.
Yeah, look, we can't avoid a fundamental truth, which is it takes a high degree of commitment. It's going to take time, effort, and energy. There are no silver bullets here to resolve the kind of issues we're talking about because they are systemic, they're structural, they've been baked in over time. And the reality is for many people, they're just becoming awakened to this reality. We've all seen that over the last several weeks. And so we have to give space and time for that awakening because that's critical. That acknowledgement is the first step to getting to the other end of this journey. But it's also, as Maisha talked about, it's that accountability. You've got to define the problem. You have to acknowledge it before you can even hope to begin taking any steps to address it. And I would think for institutions, be it ours and others on this call, large, small, or otherwise, for-profit, not-for-profit, it's also a big part of starting the first step in that journey is doing a critical self-assessment of your own organization or environment, right? And that includes talking to your teams, talking to your people. Certainly people of color, women, the LGBTQA community, and others who are often, sort of on the outside looking in, if you will. Have those conversations, be open to hearing hard, critical assessments of what your environment actually is as opposed to actually how you may perceive it to be. Because you need to understand it through the eyes of those most directly impacted or affected by some of these issues. And then you can start having really constructive, proactive engagement about, all right, what do we need to do to make sure we have a culture and an environment that is welcoming to, inclusive of, and equitable for everyone, right? And you have to start there. And it's a long journey. Do not kid yourself, right? But it's like every other important issue in all of our organizations. If it matters, you're going to commit to it. You're going to commit resources to it. You're going to put a plan in place. You're going to engage people from all levels about it. And you're going to constantly talk about the importance of it. Because otherwise, it'll lose steam, it'll lose measure, and that will matter ultimately.
Yeah, I definitely think there is an internal aspect to this and an external aspect, right? And I think that the internal is exactly what Mo said, which is looking within your own organization. Does our employee base reflect the customers that we are serving, right? Does it reflect the community with which we reside in? Does our leadership reflect that? Does our leadership reflect the population of leaders in this industry? And I think really taking a hard look at that and looking at the gaps and coming up with some concrete things that you need to do to change that, putting some repercussions behind that if you can, so tying performance and tying diversity measures and increases and successes to financial gains. I think that is an important part within an organization, really making it very clear what are your values and what is your culture and what will you stand for as a company and what is not acceptable. And then I think that there's also the external piece. I think as corporations that live within communities, that are serving communities, we have to look at what is the business that we are engaged in and is that equally equitable. And so, for example, in my business and in Maisha's business, it's looking really closely at access to healthcare. It's looking at healthcare disparities and saying, are my products accessible to, to everyone? Do they reflect the needs of those populations? Are our clinical trials representative of the individuals that need to utilize our products? And really systematically attacking those various variables based on your business. I think if you're a retailer, for example, does your marketing and your advertising reflect the individuals that you're selling your products to? Do they provide access? Do you need to do something better in terms of providing access by way of scholarships or access by way of different value products to the communities that you're operating in? And so I think there is certainly an internal look, and there is an external piece to really systematically attacking this issue.
Now, some of you already addressed this in this last question, but I was hoping you could drill down, and Desiree, you specifically actually got into this a little bit in your last answer, but in this moment of racial reckoning, I was hoping each of you could share something that your own company does really well to address structural racism. And this could be, again, something your organization does internally or externally, as Desiree was saying. But if there's one thing you want to mention that worth highlighting and that others could replicate or find a version to replicate.
Sure, I'll start. I mean, I think one thing that we do very, very well is we articulate what our goals are. So we really do take a hard look at Boston Scientific at where our internal gaps are in terms of diverse representation with respect to our employees. We set what we call as aspirational goals, and we put efforts behind meeting those goals. We're very transparent in publicizing those goals internally and externally. And we're clear about where we have succeeded in exceeding our goals and where we have fallen short. And where we fall short, we put accelerated efforts behind those goals. And so I think that level of accountability has really been important to the company to continue to drive the diversity that is important to us as a company. I would say, we do that well. It doesn't mean that level of transparency, however, doesn't mean that we are where we need to be. It doesn't mean that there's still not a lot of work for us to do. There is, but I think that we are taking a stepwise approach to how we get there and really being accountable and very transparent about what we do well and where we still need some work to do. I guess I would just add one other one. I think, following the George Floyd issue, we've been having a lot of these real talks with our employees. And I think we've had a very positive, open dialogue with employees, and they have felt comfortable telling us where we've fallen short. And we know kind of where in our leadership chain, and we've determined that our managers aren't actually very good at having some of these conversations. We've been in my view, very good with following up on that information and trying to fill in that gap, providing our managers with necessary training and necessary tools to have the conversations they need to have with their employees to move the needle. And so that level of communication between us and our employees is really critical, but then also acting on that and doing the necessary work has been really important for us.
I want to add one more thing, sorry, Maisha, about Boston Scientific is that in terms of transparency, I mean, you make your diversity data public, not just to the employees, but to everyone. You put it on your website, and that is part of a new trend in corporate America, that it's one thing to have diversity goals and, talks among yourselves, but another is to hold yourselves accountable to the entire world every year and release the data. And I really applaud Boston Scientific and others who have been doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add from the perspective of DentaQuest and the DentaQuest Partnership for Oral Health Advancement, one of the things I'm most proud of is our board and the diversity that our board has had in terms of gender, in terms of ethnic background for some time now. Additionally, as Desiree mentioned, we have the DEI goal as part of our performance management that is cascaded through the organization. And I think starting there in terms of having accountability, having leadership at the board level that reflects the communities that we intend to serve is a key aspect of how you can move the needle within your own company. much more work to do. And like Desiree, our leadership, including myself, met with our employee resource groups and really began to hear from them about some of the work that we needed to do in terms of looking at succession planning and promotions and how we do communicate internally around that, creating more opportunities for diverse candidates to advance within the company and holding ourselves accountable. So we've set some measurement goals for that this year that we will adhere to and that we will report back. And to Desiree's point, also having ongoing conversations with the employee resource groups about our progress is another key aspect of what we need to do in terms of having open and transparent communication. So I am proud of the work that we've done, much more work to do, but also looking at our supplier diversity, looking at from our foundation, who we support, as I mentioned earlier, what is the percentage of Black and Brown leaders that we support in our philanthropic giving? And that's something that we have not looked at to date that we are looking at now with clear intention and setting measurements around that. So I think there's always room to grow, but I think being transparent with our employees first and foremost about what we're doing well, what we need to improve upon has been a key aspect in terms of our success to date.
And Shirley, just to round it out, I was like, look, everyone here, the Floyd and Taylor killings and others was a significant inflection point for us as an organization. And, the benefit we had at that moment was we've had these employee resource groups or affinity groups that are open to all, but focused, whether it's on gender, race and ethnicity, veteran status, and others. But we had those communities ready, willing, and able to engage our senior leadership about how the moment was what it was calling on us to do, where we were doing well, where we were falling short. Kudos to our leaders, starting with our CEO, Larry Culp, for directly engaging and listening to candid conversations, sometimes hard conversations about how people within the enterprise are feeling, but then responding, sort of building on some things we've done previously, but committing to do some new things or enhance things, all around this notion of accountability that you've heard, because ultimately that's what it boils down to, right? If there's no accountability behind this, it doesn't matter. If you can't measure it, it doesn't matter, right? And having the top of the ticket, if you will, make clear, whether it's the board and or the CEO, hopefully all together, make clear that this is a priority, that it's an important business issue for the company, or it's important as any other issue for the company is clear. So in our case, we're seeing reinvigorated employee resource groups. Larry announced, named, and added to his senior team a chief diversity officer, taking one of the senior most people in the company to sit at his right hand and to advise him, and senior HR leader, senior talent officer on these issues around diversity, equity, inclusion. We reinstated a CEO Diversity Council, which includes all the people I just named, working with our business leaders to talk about issues of race around diversity, equity, inclusion, so that we are not taking any of these issues for granted and are talking about them and taking action around them consistent with other business priorities that matter to GE, our shareholders, our stakeholders, and otherwise. So those are just some examples. And, admittedly, we're on our own journey institutionally because people inside the institution are on their own journey individually. But we're being very candid and transparent with our team about that journey and being open to listening and learning and adapting as we move along that journey, including, Desiree talks about Boston Scientific, and you correctly applaud them for their transparency and disclosure. We're looking at where, when, and how we think about disclosing our own diversity data, right? And so more to come, but I think the energy and the effort is there. And more importantly than that, Shirley, I have every confidence, to believe our employees, our colleagues are going to hold us accountable, right? Hold leadership accountable to stay on this journey. And frankly, from a business perspective, we need to. If you're going to attract, retain, and promote the best talent, you better make sure they understand that you're committed to looking at these issues in a sincere fashion and are committed to making change where change is required.
Mo, if you're looking for a publication to publish the GE data, I'm here.
I know you will be, Shirley. I know you will.
Another question on a lot of people's minds in this moment of racial reckoning is, will this time be different? I think about, before George Floyd, there's a long list of Black men who were killed unnecessarily, murdered by police, whether it's Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Rodney King. And, is this moment different?
I hope so, Shirley, right? That's what we're all counting on. But let's be frank here for the benefit of this, close conversation we're all having on this large scale Zoom. There's a lot of concern that this moment, which has the capacity and frankly the need to be a movement, will become a moment in time and a moment that may be past. We can't afford to let that happen, right? And we may debate and discuss for all time why this moment is different than any other. But I think it's more important for us to focus on ensuring that this moment actually leads to real engagement, real change, and real commitment and time and investment of dollars and otherwise that actually can drive that change, right? And I do worry about it, though. I worry as the summer, we get deeper into the summer, as fall comes, as we all get distracted, that it may lose that momentum. But the reality is, every day we still see circumstances that give us reason to understand that we do not have the luxury of letting this moment pass and taking for granted the movement for change that is required. If we truly want this country to be and become everything we want it to be, everything we claim it to be, that more perfect union, we cannot give ground now. We must continue to dig in, work hard, and accept that it's going to be hard work and it's going to be uncomfortable. And we're going to continue to have these dialogues and others that are going to be awkward for a while, but all in purpose, for a particular purpose, to getting us to a better place. And that's within reach if we're committed to do it. But I do worry about it for sure.
Yeah, I think I would share that worry on many levels, but at the same time, I feel like the conversation is broader now, and it's not sort of the people of color having this conversation amongst themselves. I think there's a lot more, more of a deeper understanding of the experience that we, as people of color, all have that is out there, and it's hard to take that back now. I think the conversations that I've been engaged in have been very different than anything I've ever experienced, and the authenticity that we bring to these conversations is also different. To see the protests filled with people that were diverse in all aspects was, in my mind, heartening, and made me feel as if we're being seen now. These issues are being seen, and I don't think you can unsee what we continue to see as Mo's point. The killings haven't stopped. The trauma and the violence hasn't stopped. The inequities haven't stopped. And I think as we, as leaders, leverage our collective power to bring these things to the forefront, we're certainly not going to stop. And so I think, I feel like this is a different time. I feel like it's, the recognition is there, and even despite all the circumstances that got us here, that this will continue. And the protests are continuing. The conversations are different in terms of policy, and those fighting for policy change continues. And our goal is to make sure that those efforts have the resources that they need in order to continue to push forward. Desiree, I know you were going to also.
Yeah, I think it's already different. To Maisha's point, I think that, we're having conversations in corporate America. We're talking about corporate responsibility to social justice issues. We're discussing things with employees. Investors are holding us to different standards. We see our customers are, right? And those protests were not just, they were diverse within the US, but they were also global. And so I think that it already has demonstrated itself to be different than the past. I do think, to Mo's point, the question is that going to be sustainable? And I don't know that it needs to be at the same level it was, in the weeks following George Floyd's murder in order for change to happen. I think that change is already happening. I think that, we're talking about systems and dismantling systems, working on dismantling systems as we speak. Now, do I think that a magic wand and suddenly, everything's going to be equitable in 6 months? No. But I think this is the beginning of something that is different than what has occurred before. And I'm optimistic that that beginning is important, and that we, not just people of color, will continue to demand something different of our corporations, of our country, and of each other. And I think it will change.
Great. We only have 5 minutes left, and we have a bunch of questions related to the fund. So we're going to do like a lightning round, like a 2-minute lightning round, and then I have one more wrap-up question. So anyways, I think some of these, I know the fund so well I can answer. So is the fund limited to nonprofits that are based in Boston? The answer is no, right? It's statewide. This is the next question. If you are a Black and brown person who leads a nonprofit that aligns with the purposes of the fund, how do we get in touch to start a conversation and work together?
So we are currently, as I explained earlier, we're developing the framework, and so we will have listening sessions that will be published, and will enable people to come in and hear about the pillars and give their feedback and input and make themselves known to us. So that's coming, and we'll make sure that that information gets out broadly once we're ready. So we're anxious to hear from everyone.
And what are your priorities for the types of organizations and initiatives that you hope to fund?
So it's really around the 4 pillars that we've talked about, that Mo mentioned, right? So you know, those are our initial priorities. And so when we think about you know, healthcare disparities, we think about policing, right? We think about those 4 pillars. Those are the critical ones that we're certainly going to be looking at in the short term and in the longer term. I would say, you know, for sure in the short term, COVID is something that's top of everybody's mind. It is one that disproportionately impacts brown and Black communities, and so one that we are, you know, are hyper focused on for sure.
There was one actually good suggestion in the Q&A about access to good broadband in Black and brown communities, ever more important in this era of remote learning and also telemedicine. So keep that in mind. You guys probably already thought of that. So
we have. It's definitely on our minds. Definitely about the disparities in terms of education that Black and brown communities will experience, and broadband is certainly one of the topics that we're discussing. So we're on it.
So I have one last question. We only have like 2 minutes left, so quick answers. Anyways, what's your message to consumers and corporations right now, and how they can help people of color and eliminate structural racism and that has led to so many inequities? I mean, what is one thing someone can do or some company to do? And it's okay to repeat what you said or highlight what you said before.
I'll just say listen. You know, I think first and foremost is listen. I think we presume too much, and I think having the opportunity to listen and to understand is the first step, and do that in an authentic way, so that you understand what the issues are without presuming. Mo or Desiree?
Yeah, look, that you stole mine, but I would sort of modify it to say, don't be dismissive of the reality of the impact of these issues in this moment. I mean, one of the things we are discovering is that people now are more comfortable raising their voices, raising these issues inside our organizations. The challenge for all of us in leadership is not to be dismissive or disrespectful. If you want to listen, that's the way to do it. You have to engage, meet people where they are, and understand and give credence to their experience, because it matters.
Yeah, and I would just add then, you know, and then act, right? Don't be complacent. Don't just keep that information. You have to do something with it. And, you know, we talk a lot about, recently, we've been talking about these terms of, you know, what does it mean to be not racist? What does it mean to be an anti-racist? Be actively involved in breaking down the systems.
Right. Well, we're going to have James Jack come back on, and he's going to send us off.
Well, thanks, Shirley. And just once again, on behalf of UBS, I want to thank all of our speakers, Mo Cohen, Dr. Maisha Minter-Jordan, and Desiree Rawls-Morrison. What a fantastic conversation. I think you've inspired all of us to be more active in what we're trying to do as business leaders. So I hope everyone takes an action step after this. Thank you, everyone who's dialed in, zoomed in to listen to this discussion and give us your valuable time. We really appreciate that. And I would just say, if you have any questions about your personal wealth, your business, and how your philanthropic goals can be accomplished between the two, I encourage you to speak with your UBS financial advisor or a UBS financial advisor in your local community to access the insights, knowledge, and resources from all of UBS Global Wealth Management in Boston. We're at 1 Post Office Square, if you want to check out our office. Or check out our resources that we have for business owners at our UBS Business Resilience Center at ubs.com/business-resilience. Finally, once again, I want to thank you, Shirley, for moderating the great discussion, and the Boston Globe for putting on this program and launching this series. Our next program is how COVID-19 is reshaping corporate sustainability, so look out for that. We're very much looking forward to seeing you there, virtually, of course. And lastly, enjoy the remainder of your summer. Be well, and thank you so much.